Right, there we go. Okay, it is lunchtime. It's midday, nearly midday UK time. Some really interesting sports stories, obviously continuing. Obviously, the Africa Cup of Nations is in the quarter-final stage, and another football news: Frank Lampard is in advanced talks to become the new Everton manager. So we'll see how those talks play out. Wayne Rooney turned down the offer to manage at Everton. He's decided to stay with Derby County for the foreseeable future. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding Derby County at this time as well. Whether they can complete the season or not, we'll have to wait and see if that is the case. On the Everton side of things, Frank Lampard, well, there's not a lot of available managers really to take on the role. Also, he's never managed at a club threatened by relegation. Derby County, when he was in the Championship, were pushing for promotion, and Chelsea were in the Champions League places. So he's never actually had to manage a club that are in a relegation battle. That'll be interesting. It's looking likely that he will be appointed manager by the middle of next week at the latest, so before their next game. Um, Obviously, Duncan Ferguson is the interim manager. There's a lot of people saying that he should be given the job. He has applied for the position with the ownership and the board, but they've decided to interview Frank Lampard first. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what kind of progression in that regard. The Major League Baseball lockout is continuing, as far as I'm aware, although talks were meant to resume at the end of the month. So let's have a little look at Major League Baseball and what's going on, because the lockout is about to enter its second month. And therefore, let's have a look. Major League Baseball lockout. Let's have a look. Ah, yeah, Major League lockout day 57. Da, 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 da. Also in the news. So talks have resumed in regards to the Major League Baseball lockout. We're pushing 2 months now since the owners locked out the players, but talks are progressing. Um, for most of December and January, there was no discussion taking place at all. So there was no uh, you know breaking the deadlock. No talks took place. So this is positive signs. However, spring training, the pre-season, it could be affected because spring training takes place in February and early March, at the pre-season games, the exhibition games. So the clock is ticking before that starts impacting team preparation for the upcoming season, and then we'll see what happens going on from there. Um, I've done a fair few videos on the labour unrest and the history of Major League Baseball. What's Mason Greenwood done now? What's he done now? Let's have a look. What did I say about Mason Greenwood? Let's have a look at what's happened with Mason Greenwood. Mason Greenwood news. Man United star. Oh, he's been accused of domestic violence. Manchester United issue a statement. All right, let's see what Manchester United. No, I've literally been in bed all morning. This is like my lazy day is Sunday. Manchester United issue statement after social media allegations emerge against Mason Greenwood. Manchester United said it's aware of images and allegations circulating on social media regarding Mason Greenwood. Manchester United have issued a statement after allegation emerged against. They class him as a star striker on the Manchester Evening News, but yeah. The club said it's aware of images and allegations circulating on social media regarding the 20-year-old academy graduate. A spokesman for the Red Devils said they did not condone violence of any kind, but would not make further comment until the facts have been established. In a statement, they are aware of images and allegations circulating on social media. We will not make any further comment until the facts have been established. Manchester United does not condone violence of any kind. He made his debut in 2019. He's had 129 appearances, 35 goals. And of course, they next in action against Middlesbrough. No, I haven't seen, but I have been very critical of a lot of the players in the last. We're going to say 2 years now because it's basically February. So since the lockdown was brought in and league play was suspended in March 2 years ago, I've been very, very critical of players' behaviour during the lockdown, during the international breaks. Foden and Greenwood, for example, misbehaving in Iceland. Um, Obviously, there's been a spate of I at the moment we know it circulates. I probably will come across at some point, although we don't know exactly when this audio when it we don't obviously know when the footage was recorded. It's the same with like the rugby league, the NRL with the Melbourne Storm players, Cameron Munster and Brandon Smith, being caught in a hotel room taking drugs and partying during the season emerged. We don't know exactly, um, when these images were recorded, and so yeah, and there has been issues with Mason Greenwood off the field. We know there's been rumours circulating about his off-field behaviour since he made his debut, so that's nothing new. He's had issues with the national side as well, where he's breached, um, you know, um, but he's not the only player um, who's had discipline issues off the field. We know this. Uh, I mean, I could probably. I mean, this is obviously broken in the last couple of hours. This is not like it's been online for a long time. Let's have a look. Let's go on Twitter. Let's see what's trending on Twitter. Uh, let's have a look. Oh, first thing that comes up is what's trending. David De Gea has. Oh, this is interesting. David De Gea has unfollowed Mason Greenwood on Twitter and Instagram. You got some explaining to do. Cavani, Ronaldo, Telles, and De Gea have unfollowed him on his social media. Football Twitter is going to be on bare all day, but please remember, if you think there's two sides to every story, Mason Greenwood is a rapist on both. That's what someone's already said. Lock Greenwood up and let him get bashed up in prison. You're not a big man. Why are we surprised that there are men all over Twitter defending Mason Greenwood like they don't cheer for it? Well, Ronaldo's been accused of, obviously, in some of these lefties are whiny. Seeing far too many tweets about how Greenwood has wasted his career. What about the poor guy's life he's ruined? Anyone defending Mason Greenwood, follow me, or you get in the how anyone defend this two-bit trader trash spunk hustler. That's a good one. Oh, this is not looking good. This has all happened obviously this morning, and Ronaldo's had the allegations against him, more than one allegation. Tom Brady, it's looking likely he's retiring as Tom Brady, but let's have a look at what's going on with Mason Greenwood. Only silverware Mason Greenwood is touching this season. Jesus wept. Oh dear. Here we go. Manchester United star by Mason Greenwood has just signed a 5 to 10-year contract with Prison FC pending medicals. The date. Apparently it was the 8th of May 2020, so that was during lockdown. That's the date of. So then Mason Greenwood out of Manchester United is over. There's no two sides. This is obviously what happened. Domestic violence. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't give a fuck about getting. Oh dear. No, I've heard the audio now. He's done. Yeah, get him out of the game. No, I've got no sympathy. I knew there was allegations about Mason Greenwood 2 years ago, but yeah, I think he's done. It's like Benjamin Mendy. There's further allegations coming out about him. There seems to be a culture within the sport, and this is not just unique to football. But I don't really go on Twitter that often, if I'm honest. I'm not really on Twitter a lot. I just when I post me videos, I post a link on my Twitter. I'm not on Twitter a lot, but I think he's done. I've heard the audio now. That's enough for me. Right, and I'm looking at you look at the date. That's a year and a half ago. So I'm surprised. I am a little bit surprised that there was no legal action taken. But there was allegations going around that there was something happening off the field with Mason Greenwood um, uh, last year, and at the end of 2020 when the season resumed, there was rumours circulating about some of his off-field um, behaviours, and then of course he was up in Reykjavik, Phil Foden. They smuggled in a couple of women into the hotel, breached the quarantine rules that were put in place, breached the team discipline, got sent home. Um, I It does trouble me, but then this is not the first player. I mean, Stan Collymore beating up Eureka Johnson in public through down a flight of stairs in a nightclub. And he admitted today, yeah, he was in a bad position in his life. I'm not a big fan of Stan Collymore. I have met him. He admitted to domestic violence. You've got Jeffrey Boycott, the former cricketer and commentator. He's been on trial for, beating up his partner in France. And he tries to avoid talking about it. Yeah, I remember there was it's a difficult one. I prefer not to start talking about this. Really, it's not something I was expecting. I mean, I literally woke up this morning, had a bit of a vegetation. You know what I mean? It's a Sunday. Um, Not something I was expecting to wake up to and just be discussing. But rumours have been circulating about his poor behaviour. And yeah, in American football, I've done videos on the NFL and scandals in the NFL. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, there's been allegations against him. The Viking party, the Minnesota Vikings party vote scandal. Um, there's been a whole host of domestic violence allegations. Michael Vick with his dog fighting ring. Um, yeah, but bearing in mind, the images she's posted, the date on them is early May 2020. So we're looking at, a year and a half ago. And a lot of players didn't cover themselves in a lot of glory during that initial 6 to 10 week lockdown, beginning of well, I say last one, beginning, the 2020 lockdown. Misbehaviour like Jack Grealish, drink driving at a house party, crashing his car, getting caught on tape. Kyle Walker consistently being, you know, we there was concern. Well, from what I remember, and my next door neighbour is a Man United fan, and we were like, we regularly chat about the football um, and how United were doing, how my team Blackburn are doing. We regularly have a bit of football banter, and we were discussing last season about Mason Greenwood looking a bit off. He wasn't in the team constantly. He was dropped a lot by Solskjaer, and the fact that she's recorded it means, this is obviously not a new thing. But recording someone without their consent is also a crime. So that then makes things difficult when it comes to a court of law, from what I can remember from my law studies. Because then you're recording without someone's consent, which is also a crime. However, there's obviously evidence that, uh, he's done. I think he's done. Man United, while they're saying they're going to stay tight-lipped on the subject, obviously there's been issues with Mason Greenwood behind the scenes, more than just this. And yeah, American football, we've seen it in every sport. Every sport, there's been individual athletes or whole teams even misbehaving, and I think I've heard the audio now. That's enough for me. I don't care if I get a copyright violation for that one. I really don't, because Now it's doing the trends on social media. He is done. There is no way anyone defending him has got to have a screw loose because, in my opinion, like the evidence is strong. I mean, no, it doesn't matter how good a player is. Robinho's been done. He's a fugitive. No, it doesn't matter how skillful or talented someone is in their sporting career. If they do that, to me, I don't care if they don't play ever again because they brought the sport to disrepute. Obviously, these young men and young women to a certain extent, because Hope Sala got done for child abuse, beating up her nephew. These sports stars are role models for young people, and yeah, what can you say? The sport needs to take stronger action when it comes to allegations of this type, and when players are, caught out doing things. There need to be lengthier suspensions. There needs to be a zero tolerance. And I have argued before that a lot of these young players get paid a lot quite quickly, big contracts, very young, not a lot of guidance. A lot of them do come from poorer backgrounds, and he's the complete opposite to Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford, people criticise Marcus Rashford for his charity work and his form's dipped since he's done all his charity work. But Marcus Rashford's the complete opposite of Mason Green. Very similar backgrounds. You know, um, there are areas of Manchester that are really deprived areas economically. But no, Mason Greenwood. There's been question marks over his attitude and off-field dramas. Oh yeah, Ray Rice. Yeah, no, there's been a whole host of high profile uh, athletes who've been caught out. I mean, Ben Stokes and Alex Hales with that nightclub incident. Now, while Ben Stokes was found not guilty, Alex Hales got away scot free. Alex Hales' career's gone down the toilet. Ben Stokes, people are going, he's one of the best cricketers we've got right now. And yeah, no, he is. At the same time, uh, again, he's got a litany of off-field dramas. And yes, Man United could have definitely put a stop to it. It's like Niall Ranger, whose career's gone down the toilet. He's on a pay-to-play basis now in the lower divisions. He's had multiple chances. What can you do with these people? Like I say, it's a privilege, not a right, to be a professional athlete, and that privilege can be taken away very, very quickly. And unfortunately, football, uh, rugby league has got an issue with this as well. Rugby union's got an issue with it. Cricket's got an issue with it. American football, ice hockey. Slava Voinov has never played since his assault conviction against his wife. But he was found guilty of beating his wife, domestic battery. Hasn't played in nearly a decade. The NHL has said, no, we're not reactivating your contract. So he hasn't played for the best part of a decade. And they're protecting their image. They're more interested in their image. They're more interested in their public brand, their image, damage limitation. They've got the money. They've got the lawyers. I'm sorry, no. There's been too many incidents now of domestic violence. In regards to addiction, I mean Paul Merson and Paul Gascoigne, and these are players that I watched growing up. Paul Merson's been very open about his addiction issues, and he gets absolutely hammered on social media. But he's been very open and honest that he's had problems and he's had issues, and he has relapses, drugs, alcohol, gambling. Paul Gascoigne didn't get the help. We've learned nothing over the last 30 years, it seems. Nothing. Um, uh, and it does raise questions about the culture within the sport, of this entitlement culture. We've seen it in rugby league and the NRL. We've seen like Jared Hayne, for example, and what's happened to him. This is not an isolated incident within professional sport. Not isolated at all. Oscar Pistorius, uh, when he was put on trial, they got a lot of his friends and ex partners to do a character assessment. They cross examined his close friends and confidants, and they did a character assessment, and it was found that he was very aggressive, had an obsession with firearms, and oh look, he shot his partner 3 times through the bathroom door. And there was allegations of domestic abuse from Oscar Pistorius. So it doesn't matter, where you are in the world, professional sport has this undercurrent of elitism, entitlement, and ill discipline off the field. And then you look at other players who were ill disciplined on the field, but off the field are gentle giants. Like Vinnie Jones, people go, he was an animal on the field, yeah, but he was very different away from the game. Um, you, the the fact that these various leagues and high profile clubs have tried their best to do the hush money, the hush hush, and no, I think the culture within the sport has to change. And I've discussed this on the channel many times, and people just don't want to watch the videos. People, you know, I've raised the issues of player welfare and addiction, alcohol. Um, I'll be happy if he never wears a football shirt ever again. And he's not there. And yes, he's young and he needs guidance, but the, the fact his teammates don't want anything to do with him, he's done. He's done. Because they will have links with other players at other clubs, and they're saying, "Look, this guy he's bad news. Like, if your club is interested in signing him down the line, regardless of the illegal outcomes of anything that gets put forward to the police." Yes, it's emerged. I think it's his ex-partner has made allegations of some rather not nice domestic violence allegations of yeah. It's all over social media. It's blown up the internet, and it's it is worrying. And then you look at other players. There's not enough players within the game, especially from the Afro Caribbean community, who speak out against this. In my opinion, um, there isn't. There's not enough high profile players from within the Afro Caribbean community who play not just in England but across Europe who say enough's enough. This is unacceptable. Um, Yeah, you could argue his upbringing, but Marcus Rashford's from a very humble, similar background where there's two options. You get involved in crime or you move away. And Jude Bellingham as well. There is a difference, and as I say, Manchester, much like London, is a city of contrasts. There's some very wealthy areas of Manchester, like Altrincham, for example, in comparison to Moss Side, and then there's places like Moss Side, which are not as wealthy. And then you've got the other areas around Greater Manchester, like Oldham, Bolton, Wigan, Salford. It doesn't matter what his dad was or wasn't. In my opinion, this is a grown man basically acting like an entitled prick. From what I can gather from the limited audio and the footage of that's on social media now. I came from a single parent household, and it doesn't matter because how do I put this? I hate, you know, any man or even any woman who lays a finger on their partner, in my opinion, is just scum. Because the home is going to be a happy place. And regardless of his age, he's not the first player. I mean, Benjamin Mendy's in his late 20s. He's facing a lengthy spell in prison. You've had Adam Johnson, um, Ched Evans, although he was found not guilty and then on a retrial. Um, so this is not an isolated incident. There was a Watford player, was it Marlon King? Um, this is not an isolated incident. Now, we've seen similar allegations at Jared Hayne in the NRL. We've seen it with Ben Roethlisberger in the NFL, though there's ongoing legal dramas there. But there's been rumours about his off-field behaviour for quite some time. And yeah, there's we Aaron Hernandez, for example, in the NFL when he decided to kill people. There were warnings there about his character that he may not be suitable, you know, and then needed guidance, and they didn't guide him. And I watched the Aaron Hernandez documentary, and that actually was the three-parter, and that was generally chilling to watch the Aaron Hernandez three-part series on Netflix. And the warning signs were there when he was in college. The warning signs were there that he had a short temper, very violent, aggressive, hung around with unsavory characters, had an obsession with firearms, regardless of sexuality in the end. That he was a very troubled individual, and no one. I mean, no one stepped in and helped. Um, it's it is worrying though. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But there have been rumours about Mason Greenwood going back a year and a half. There was unnamed players, obviously, being an unnamed player is being suspected of doing something. Then with Benjamin Mendy and Gylfi Sigurdsson um, over the summer. So yeah, and I think Man United were clearly fully aware that there was some of his teammates are going, something's not right here. Some of his youth teammates are going, hang on a second, something doesn't feel right here. The teammates, be it in the youth setup, the senior squad, coaching setup, were going, there's something, going on with this lad. Something isn't right. And you can generally tell by someone's body language and behaviour. Um, there were things about Greenwood when he was young, when the young City player killed himself, and Greenwood being depressed from it. I hope he doesn't get away with this by doing the same thing. Yeah, that young. I mean, look, it's difficult, but you can generally tell when something's not right with someone when there's an attitude change, there's a body language change. They and I've seen this in friends of mine when they're going through a very difficult relationship where there's domestic violence. I know someone personally where I did notice their behaviour changed around people. They seem more withdrawn, more quiet, less vibrant than what they were before. And there were warning signs were there, and you know, but it's a difficult one to put a thing on. But I've always said that I think the young players are given a lot of spotlight very, very young. There's a lot of media spotlight. It's like Wayne Rooney, he's lived his entire adult life in the public eye. David Beckham has lived his entire adult life in the public eye. Um, Other players, not so much. I well, um, there for me the Man City thing there is definitely a culture issue there as well because players like Kyle Walker um, keep misbehaving. However, now there's obviously a culture issue within the sport because this is not a new thing. This has not happened overnight. This is not just an isolated incident. Um, Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood, when we were the England national side were playing against Iceland in a qualifier, they're in Iceland, they're in Reykjavik. There's a lock, there's COVID protocols in place. There's a team curfew in place, and they breached that, and they smuggled a couple of Icelandic top totty, should we say, into the hotel room, and they got caught and they got sent home. But the fact they felt able to do that and the brazen nature they felt they were able to do that and get away with it says to me a lack of respect for authority, an entitlement culture within the sport. Um, Andy Carroll had issues when he was at Newcastle. Niall Rangers is a player who's had issues throughout his career. And then you look at other players, and there's no off-field dramas with them. Um, and yeah, I think there is a lack of guidance with some of these young players, and there's a lack of direction. And I compare this to I look at the NRL. And I know it's a different sport and it's a different sport culture in Australia, but the same things are happening over there that are happening here with English football, with English cricket, for example, and English rugby league and rugby union. There are players getting caught with drugs constantly caught with drugs on their person, right? You have you know players getting done for drink driving. Now, drink driving is a thing; it happens. Some people they have that extra half pint. They're slightly over the limit. It happens. It's not the end of the world. I'm not a big fan of people who decide to drink drive. But they lose my sympathy very very quickly. But it happens. Um, there, however, in this case, there's been rumours circulating about his off-field behaviour, his violence towards women, and some of his drinking antics and partying antics for some time. This is not something that's come out of the blue. However, what he's done is not pretty pleasant. What he's accused of, however, there has been an undercurrent of something going on with him, teammates and coaches sort of raising red flags, going, we have concerns about this individual, and the club not following up on those concerns or keeping a closer eye on their employee, and that's a duty of care as well. Now, I am not condoning what he's done. I'm not standing up for what he's done. I think full force of law should be thrown at him. I don't care that he's a famous football player. What he's done is wrong. And I think was it Lee Hughes? I can't remember the West Brom player who killed a guy drink driving, dangerous and reckless driving under the influence, and he got 5 years in prison, never played football ever again. Now, this is like 20 years ago. There was a West Brom player who was involved in a car accident whilst under the influence, never played football ever again. Career done. No one wanted to touch him. It was don't go there. But there's been allegations against other players. Ronaldo, yes, there have been more than one. There's been more than one allegation against Cristiano Ronaldo in regards to violence towards women. Nothing new there, and it's in the public domain, and hush money was paid. So, and what was deemed acceptable 20 years ago is not acceptable now. So, there's a lot of things that have changed culturally. But I do find it interesting that not enough players are speaking up in anti-domestic violence. Not. I think culture at City isn't too worried since Walker seems to be a one-off and the club has massively distanced themselves from Mendy. Yes, however, Adam Johnson, I know he wasn't playing at City at the time, was an ex-City player during his current ownership era. Um, Kyle Walker, Foden's obviously been caught out with England misbehaving, with Mason Greenwood, ironically. So there seems to be a sort of culture issue there. Whether internally they're discipline finding players for misbehaving, whatever. Kyle Walker continues to misbehave, which says to me that there is a complete lack of just the entitlement for some of these players. Now, the fact that Kyle Walker is still contracted by the club speaks volumes. The fact they haven't got rid of him. Um, I don't know if Ronaldo's banned from the US. I know he had legal troubles over there, but I don't think he's banned from the US at all. There's no ban on his visa entering because, hypothetically, I know this is a long stretch, he could still technically, if he wants to play until he's 40, play at the World Cup in 40 years' time. Um, put put Foden and Grealish on the bench for going to the wrong club after a game. Oh wow, he benched them. They weren't internally suspended by the club because they could still, you know, play in that game. Um, you know, wow, they went to the wrong nightclub. I just think, yeah, these are human beings, but I think when you are representing a brand that is worth so much money, and you are in a position of being a role model, Grealish has had so many off-field dramas with alcohol. He likes to get on the piss, basically. And Foden is a younger player. He's been caught out before being silly. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a few drinks after a game with your teammates, your friends, socialising, being normal, being human. But I remember Stephen Gerrard in a nightclub in Liverpool, a bar in Liverpool, got charged with assault. There was the guy kept hassling him, and he had enough, and he basically battered the crap out of this guy. But Stan Collymore sticks out to me in the mid '90s with the Eureka Johnson incident, and his career did suffer a little bit because of that. And no, he held his hands up after the event. He said he was drinking a lot of the time. There was a lot of drugs going around at the time in the '90s in the playing group of the Premier League. And he went and did, his anger management courses and drink awareness courses. And while personally, I'm not a fan of Stan Collymore, he made a change to his lifestyle. However, um, it's that tainted people's opinion of Stan Collymore. Um, and there's still football chants about Stan Collymore and beating up Eureka Johnson. So his image and his people's perception of him has forever been changed. Um, but I don't think enough players, past and present, are speaking up about domestic violence and saying this is unacceptable, and saying we've got to stop this. And if obviously these are allegations against Mason Moon, although the evidence is looking pretty bad and pretty public. Um, I mean, violence against anyone in a domestic context is wrong. I've had violent partners, and it's just I'm going for a walk. I've had I've had friends who've suffered at the hands of a domestic violence situation, be it from a parent, uh, sibling, partner, male or female, doesn't matter. But I do think, well, that'll be the day, won't it? Because at the end of the day, this is not a new thing. Um, it's not just football. We've seen it in other sports as well. Domestic violence allegations against individual players. Um, I refer to Stan Collymore and Jeffrey Boycott because now they're in the commentary side of things and they're pundits and they're journalists. People will bring up what happened when they were playing or when they retired from playing, and it does. I mean, like again, like there were warnings put out before the lockdown that there was a concern that locking down vulnerable people with violent spouses, be it male or female, there was going to be a rise in domestic violence. Living on top of each other, there was going to be a possible rise in domestic violence. And that has proven to be the case. More women and men are going to charities like Shelter and domestic violence charities, and there's been an absolute surge in recorded cases of domestic violence. And from looking at the footage and the date stamps on those images, that's May 2020. So you make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. Yes, Brett Finch. The NRL and other related media are trying to distance themselves from Brett Finch. He's meant to have his next court appearance around now, I believe. Um, Brett Finch, Jesus Christ, yes. He's been a very troubled character throughout his adult life. Um, and, it's really surprising because he comes from a very stable family background. His dad was a coach and an ex player. So he comes from that, big kind of family community background within the game. Um, and Brett Finch, Jesus Christ, that's a litany of alcohol and drugs, and he even laughs at himself. But what's come out in the last couple of months about Brett Finch is troubling. Um, and we'll have. Yeah, he's been dropped by everyone. He was on a Bloke in a Bar, a podcaster, and also an ex-rugby league player. I occasionally watch Bloke in a Bar podcast, and they've deleted all the episodes that Brett Finch is in. All of the episodes. That's about 30, 40 videos off their YouTube channel and their podcast. Um, he's been completely erased, like he doesn't exist. I went on the NRL.com streaming website, which I have a subscription for. They haven't removed the episodes of the Matty Johns podcast that Brett Finch is on that's still up there. They haven't erased that from their back catalogue, so to speak. But everyone's just dumped him like yeah, they just dropped him. Um, every sponsorship and media outlet that ever interviewed him or was working with him, gone. Everyone's distanced themselves. But again, no one is speaking out about abuse, and there's no one like an advertising campaign where we have to stop this. You know, and this is yeah, and it's following on from Jared Hayne. It's following on from Russell Packer, who basically shattered a guy's head in a pub fight, left a guy with brain damage, did 18 months in prison, was allowed back into the game, which I find ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. That they allowed him back in the game, but other players who've had issues with drink. I think yeah, Brett Finch is cooked. He's cooked. He's not coming back from that. There's no way Brett Finch is ever gonna be. He's gonna have to like hide himself away. Quite frankly, there's no coming back from the allegations. Um, but we'll see what comes out in the court documents. We'll see what happens at trial day, and if he's guilty or not guilty. And we'll see how the legal process works. Now, it's troubling. It is troubling. The sad thing is, we're not discussing Frank Lampard, for example, having talks with Everton about becoming their new manager. We're not discussing the Six Nations and the FA Cup fourth round. We're not discussing the Major League Baseball lockout, where there now appears to be discussions taking place between the Major League Baseball Players Association and the league about resolving the dispute. So there's other sporting stories to talk about. The Africa Cup of Nations, for example. Um, the relegation battle in the Premier League, the promotion chase in the Championship. What's going to happen. There's other sports stories that are really important and newsworthy. The Winter Olympics meant to be starting. There's more athletes pulling out, you know. But then suddenly we're getting onto what Mason Greenwood's done overnight, or what's come out in the last few hours this morning and lunchtime, and that is troubling me. That regardless of the positive and negative sports stories out there, which involve like sport finance, this team winning, this team losing, this player having a great performance, this new coach getting installed in place, and, can this team make the FA Cup final? Can this team win like the Stanley Cup playoffs? What's going to happen in this season and previous season? So the positive and negatives, the nice things to talk about. Breaking this comes up, and now we're having a discussion about domestic violence and how sport should be a leader in raising awareness, saying this is not right, stop, and players consistently doing it, and even female players, as I say, Hope Solo, uh, got done for domestic violence. That's a female. Rarer though it is, it happened, and people still keep bringing that up on social media, going, "You are a violent person." So there is no full recovery. Uh, uh, Around 20. Well, if you look at just seen this, was told today. Mason Greenwood. Well, look, the dates on some of the timestamps on some of the images on Twitter that his, I'm assuming, ex-partner has posted, say May 2020. There were rumours circulating that, yeah, there were issues, unnamed players, and I think Mason Greenwood's name came up in conversation. Yeah, Matt Lodge. Yeah, he committed assault. Found on guilty. He was allowed to play. Yep. Todd Carney's the player I'm thinking of. Had a massive problem with drink and had a few offences off the field as well. Deregistered by the NRL, not allowed to play anymore. Um, Now we know he's turned his life around post then, but he was deregistered for life. Ben Barber not found guilty, even though he did beat the crap out of his partner in a Townsville casino. Deregistered for life without any legal, you know, uh, process to go through. Um, yes, I think that was around March time, but I also believe that could have been Mendy as well, because there was a series of offences that Benjamin Mendy, the dates. But there were rumours that there was something going on with an unnamed player playing for one of the Manchester-based clubs. Now, Greater Manchester, remember, Greater Manchester is more than Man United and Man City. You've got Bolton, you've got Salford City, you've got Altrincham, you've got Wigan in there. Bury obviously gone out of business. You've got Oldham. There are other clubs in Greater Manchester, but yes, there was a rumour circulating about a year ago of an unnamed player being investigated. It's quite likely this could be Mason Greenwood. If they're saying that there were previous allegations that may or may not have been covered up going back to early 2020, then yes. But we are speculating at this point, and that is very, very dangerous. What we do know is what's on social media now is within the last 18 months, and is not pleasant viewing. And questions will be asked about the club, their disciplinary policy, what they knew and when. And it's like the Chicago Blackhawks scandal. They knew the entire time that what was going on with the coach Aldrich and the players and the interns he was abusing. They knew the entire time. So there's been a culture of cover up in professional sport for a long time, especially when it comes to high profile players. I would prefer if Mason Greenwood never played football ever again. He's in a privileged position. It's not a right. Um, he's in the United first team when another youth team player has been let go, been told to surplus to requirements at the same age. He's probably playing in the lower divisions or giving up the sport altogether. That possibly deserved it more. Um, Obviously, I think he'll be internally suspended. I don't think Man United can name him, especially if high-profile teammates like Ronaldo, De Gea, and others have deleted him off their social media and don't want to have anything to do with him. I don't think he plays for Man United ever again. I don't think he plays football ever again, personally. Same with Benjamin Mendy, done. Regardless if he's found not guilty, I don't think anyone wants him back. And I'll be deadly serious. I think football and sport in general needs to start taking the issue of violence against women and men to a certain extent, domestic violence, violence against women, far more seriously. And what is terrifying, if I was thinking his first third sentence, I think he's had other issues off the field. I think there might reopen any other. If he's had allegations against him before that may not have reached trial stage or charging stage, that will count against him. Because it depends if the victim wants to press charges. So let's say she's phoned the police before then and doesn't want to press charges, then that becomes more difficult. Or if no charge is finally brought and he's released without charge, if he's ever been charged, it becomes a bit more of a legal nightmare because if he is charged with an offence, then there's bail hearings, and then there's other court orders put in place, like restraining orders, banning orders from certain areas, can't within 500 feet, no contact with the opposite party unless through solicitors, and then it gets a bit more complicated. But I would think that this is not the first time the police have been involved with Mason Greenwood. I would hazard a guess, but again, speculation is dangerous, and I'd rather not do that. But it's not a good look for the league. It's not a good look for the club. And again, this is not an isolated incident with just one club and one player. This is an ongoing theme that football's had for a long time, long time, and it seems to be getting more common more recently. So in the last 20 years, I think there's been a whole spate of individual players, and there needs to be a culture shift within the sport. There needs to be a culture shift within the sport. And this follows on from Benjamin Mendy, and again, the same time frame, the lockdown period, all the way through to now. There has been several allegations against several high-profile players within the game, within the English Premier League, and there definitely needs to be a culture shift. There needs to be a wake-up call because this continues to happen on a yearly basis now. And it's not just an individual club having a culture issue. This is across the board in all leagues. And it seems to be more prevalent in the Premier League and the Championship than the lower divisions. Should politics and sport mix? No, but I've tried to the longer it goes on this channel, the harder it is to separate sport and politics. Watch some of Major League Baseball videos in regards to the London series that they were proposing when they had it, um, talking about the London City Stadium, the political side of things, how the taxpayer had to help fund the reconfiguration of the London City Stadium. Politics and sport over the last few years has become more and more difficult to separate the two. Unfortunately, there is an issue with this 100%. Absolutely, it's not the only sport that's got a problem. Um, but definitely, there's been studies shown that, especially during high-profile matches like the Old Firm derby, for example, between Rangers and Celtic, the Liverpool Man United derby, for example, Arsenal Tottenham, some of the big high-profile matches that clubs have, there is a spike in domestic violence allegations. Um, um, uh, when like your team loses, you're on the drink, partner goes home, beats the wife up, beats the husband up, beats the kids up. There is a spike, especially with high profile like international matches. Um, there is a noticeable spike in violent offences. Um, uh, at the time. So studies have shown that, and of course, I'm not saying all players are nasty individuals, and a lot of them are very humble off the field. There's a lot of them very humble off the field. Um, but it is striking that high-profile players at the club are trying to distance themselves from Mason Greenwood as we speak in the last few hours. Um, it's it is worrying. Like, and the club has to take some responsibility because he's been in their youth system for a long time. He's been an employee of them for a long time. There's got to be a you know a there's got to be things put in place. No, the Christmas period anyway. It's not just women; it's men as well. The Christmas period, I don't like the Christmas period. I find it a very lonely time of year. But the risk of suicide goes up around the festive period. So any time between uh, October and Easter, so that 6 month period, suicides go up, domestic violence cases go up, um, people going admitted for mental health, alcohol, and drugs goes up. Um, and yes, having the World Cup at that time of year, it's yeah. There's studies been proven that um, certain sporting events like the Olympics and Wimbledon and things like that, domestic violence drops. There's more of a community kind of spirit. It's generally less stressful. Um, when it comes to other sporting events like World Cups, like individual nations, going for a tournament, and there being a drinking culture, so rugby and football, for example, the opposite is the case. More spouses and family members report a spike in um, violence in the home. So studies have backed that up, and there's been calls to restrict alcohol sales during tournaments, in fan zones and in reduced pub opening hours and off license opening hours, corner shop opening hours, convenience store. There's been various you know calls from pressure groups. The the issue though with my Winter Olympics predictions or thoughts of being in China. Look, without the NHL players going, I'm probably less likely to watch the ice hockey. And the only events I really like, I mean, they're having to use fake snow to, uh, uh, you know, uh, to make the snowboarding and skiing events skiable, basically. And so I think, yeah, I have my views. I try and keep politics out of it, but we've seen the diplomatic boycotts as well. Um, and athletes pulling out for various reasons. The Summer Olympics in Tokyo without fans, people didn't really enjoy it, didn't really get the viewership that obviously the IOC were hoping. There was a lot of political issues with that Summer Olympics in Tokyo. It created pressure on the Japanese government. There was growing dissatisfaction with it. China, on the other hand, I mean, I've got views on it, but I'm not so sure it's going to be that great in Olympics. Um, yeah, the Mason Greenwood news, Chester, is not pleasant listening or viewing. It would explain a lot of the issues he's had while he's been at Man United. There's been allegations against Mason Greenwood off the field. There's been rumours circulating about his behaviour towards women and some of the antics he gets up to, some of his legal issues. It's just be warned. It's social media's exploded. Um, we've obviously got to remember these are allegations, but it's looking more and more likely that he's done, and his teammates don't want anything to do with him. So we can go back and have a look at Mason Greenwood on Twitter. Well, let's have a look. Let's have a look. See what else is breaking. So I read the article from the Manchester Evening Standard. Daily Mail's now covering it. Police are aware of social media allegations against Mason Greenwood. That's Wales Online. Mason Greenwood's girlfriend Harriet Robson shares pictures of her bloody face after The Mirror, The Guardian, Goal.com. Yeah, they're all covering it now. Major, yeah, they're all covering it. Yeah, Nike have now released a statement as well. Nike statement on have said we are deeply concerned by the disturbing allegations and will continue to closely monitor the situation. Yeah, no, I don't care about Mason Greenwood's football career. That's gone. It should never come back. What I think we all care about is his partner Harriet Robson getting justice and the help and support that she needs. She's incredibly brave for speaking out, and we should all applaud her. Just woke up to the Greenwood news. So lost for learn. No woman deserves to go through that abuse. As a Man United fan, I speak for all here when I say Mason Greenwood should have his contract terminated immediately. Um, um, what else? Mason Greenwood, it's over. Rather than focusing on its essential abusive relationship, everyone knows where they can get help, solidarity. That's the domestic abuse helpline. Fellas, if someone sends you a WhatsApp with a joke about Mason Greenwood, mate, this is the first time you challenge them. Sickening video and audio. Please get Mason Greenwood out of Manchester United immediately. A lot of men are actually saying they don't want to see him ever wear a football jersey ever again. Bravery of Harriet Robson to come forward must be incredibly tough. No one should have to go through that far things that Mason Greenwood has done to her. I don't ever want to see Mason Greenwood pull on an England jersey ever again. Look Mason Greenwood up and throw away the key, vile human being. Well, this Mason Greenwood stuff is disgraceful. Monsters are among us everywhere. I don't even know where to go. Most of what I'm seeing on Twitter is actually men calling him out. So it's popular on Twitter. Women's Aid, United Report. Yeah, you just got to. What I'm actually seeing is more men than women calling him a scumbag. So there may be a change of culture here. Don't judge before the facts and proof is out there. This could be everyone on the order. I agree, it's true, and he belongs in jail, but there's no proof of it yet. Why hasn't she got the police involved in social media? Something isn't right. Then there's other. Mason Greenwood is actually finished getting out of Man United. Um, David De Gea has unfollowed Mason Greenwood on Twitter and Instagram. Mason Greenwood should not be on a football pitch for the foreseeable future with his girlfriend's posting is beyond horrifying. No two sides are defensive for this because the audio clip proves what he was doing. Sickening video and audio. Please get Mason Greenwood out of Manchester United immediately. The sad thing is she knew she had to record his voice and take mobile photo evidence because no one would have believed her otherwise. Hope justice is served. Now, Prison FC, which is the joke account, the newest signing of Prison FC, let's give a warm welcome to Mason Greenwood. The audio recording is the end of Greenwood. David De Gea following on Twitter. Mason Greenwood should face the consequences, simple as that. Yeah, so it's not looking good for Mason Greenwood. People are abusing me for saying United and Ollie were covering up stuff Greenwood was doing while they were blaming Southgate. Well, let's see what. All I can. I'm stunned. There is audio and video footage. You've got some explaining to do, Mason Greenwood. To everyone who wants to know what Mason Greenwood actually does to me, it's not nice. The audio is pretty bad as well. I don't care what people think and say that Bruno Fernandes. Let's stop talking about Mason Greenwood for a second. Right, let's see what. Right, this. Alex Telles has also unfollowed him. Does it mean if one of your friends or relatives has done something wrong, you have to turn your back on them? Why would you unfollow them? There's a difference between friend, relative, and co-worker. But why though? And what is this unfollowing going to do instead of just saying he messed up and helping change his path? Ronaldo never followed Greenwood. He knew it. The same Ronaldo who admitted to carrying on when a woman told him to stop drinking. Ronaldo. My question is how the record came up. David Hayes on follow Mason Greenwood on Instagram. Even Maguire, Sancho, and Rashford did the same. Manchester United official Twitter account has also unfollowed Mason Greenwood. Apparently. And let's not forget this happened multiple times before United knew about it 100%. Mason Greenwood's turned off his comment section. So, there you go. Instant proven guilty. No one should be following him. He was this is an interesting one. He was first accused of an orgy with Foden. Now this boy's bad news. Stop spreading lies. He's always been cocky. He's in deep tropical soup. He deserves everything that's coming his way. I can't imagine he's on his head right now. He's on top of the world now. He's collapsing his feet. I still agree with you. Bruno De Gea and Rashford stand for everything this club represents. I think it's the right thing. Uh, uh, yeah, that's just one thread. Um, Mason Greenwood should not be a football pitch for the foreseeable future. One charge replaced for the foreseeable future ever again. Thank you. It should be the police first, not trouble social media. His defence team will lap it up. It's October. It could be Halloween costume. The voice clip is taken out of context. Sorry, what context are you looking for? Fine. Uh, he's finished Man United following protocols, but soon he'll be spending his contract terminated. Absolutely disgusting. No place in the society for violence. So everyone's saying, wait for the whole story. What would that be like? You mistakenly punched her and bust her lips. You vexed him, so you beat her up, or she just busts herself and incriminating what I don't understand. It's called due process, my guy. You might like it, but it's where's the? Yeah, you don't listen to the audio. You don't want to. Yeah, so the social media has gone into full blown, um, full blown meltdown. Um, yeah, yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Bit of a mess there. I think he's done. It's quite sad that we're discussing a whole live stream about Mason Greenwood and his off-field antics, but yeah, no, I think he's done. I don't think there's any coming back from this. Um, but as I say, there's definitely a culture issue within professional sport, and this is not an isolated incident. Um, so we'll have to see what happens now. We'll have to see um, how things play out. But I think there's been a few players who've gone to prison, and then. But I think football needs to stop giving second and third chances to these individuals. The problem is a lot of them have not lived in the real world, so to speak. They've been in academies, and all they've been taught is you're going to be a professional football player. You're going to be a professional football player. And when they get released, that young Man City player sadly took his own life, and Man City were found to have failed in their duty of care to him. Um, drink driving is different. That's different. I think drink driving is a different type of offence. When it comes to like violent offences, um, it's a completely different thing. But yes, there was a Plymouth goalkeeper who got done for drink driving. I forget his name. He's that unimportant. But the problem I think football has is not a lot of these players when they're in the youth system, actually have day jobs. They are told from a very young age you are going to be this, and when they get there, they are overpaid. They are paid a lot very very young, and they're not given the guidance they should have, and they're not guided in the right way. Um, but we'll see what happens later on in the day. Let's see if the mainstream news, because now it's been covered by almost every major news outlet there is. Um, because I was actually on the BBC Sport website and this wasn't being covered. Because obviously there's an Africa Cup of Nations match later this evening. There's a Women's FA Cup game being played. Um, okay, Man United, Van der Beek is set to join Everton on loan. Great. Not a single thing on the BBC Sport website about what's going on. Not a single article. I'm sorry, but the major broadcaster in this country not to have a single article. That for me is not good. That's a joke. So, not happy with that personally. That for me is not good enough. Yeah, not a single article on it. Not a single article. Which for me is not not good enough. Right, so BBC aren't covering it, so that tells you why. Sky Sports. Let's have Sky Sports. Even though I'm not a Sky Sports fan, let's have a look. Go away. Um, uh, latest news. West Ham, cricket, football. No, they're not. No, nothing on nothing on Sky Sports News either, which I find quite quite troubling. Quite frankly. Um, yeah, so uh, nothing on Sky either, which I find quite surprising. I'm concerned that it's the fourth Premier League player to be arrested this year for a serious offence. Yes, I agree with that. There's a culture issue. I'm sure I've covered this before. My thoughts on the Djokovic Australia debacle. It's no one wins in that one. Bearing in mind, Australia is facing a general federal election later this year, so there's a political element to it. Whether Djokovic plays at the other three majors this year, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Djokovic. But on the Australian side of things and the tennis side of things, Djokovic was not the only player to be barred entry to Australia and deported. There was 11 others that were unvaccinated. He wasn't the only one not allowed to play at the Australian Open. So while he was the most high profile, the ATP and the WTA and the tour organisers and all that, they're going to have to look at the vaccination status of players and complying with rules where they when they're on the world circuit at the minor tournaments and the majors as well. I think that's going to have far-reaching implications, not just for tennis but for other sports. So watch that space when it comes to the Djokovic Australia debacle. I think that's going to have a much wider impact on things. Yeah, every newspaper's covering it now. I'm surprised BBC and Sky aren't. That's why I'm really surprised. And no, it doesn't sit with the BBC's agenda because there is a. I'm stunned with the lack of reporting by the two major news outlets um, in this country. I'm absolutely stunned by that personally. I find that unbelievable. Don't forget the media knowing. Yes, there were allegations but because you've got to be a bit careful when in the media because you can be sued for libel and slander, and there'd be massive payouts from the media companies to individuals when they have got facts wrong. There is certain things rules the media have to follow by unless it's investigative journalism. But yes, I'm fully aware that members of the media, because the second city of the British media is actually Manchester. Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily if it was a white player beating his a girlfriend of colour, it would be the same. I think it should be highlighted regardless. In my opinion, domestic violence is domestic violence, but there's also allegations of sexual assault in there as well. So he's looking at some more severe charges rather than just assault. But again, the audio is I think done it. The audio is definitely done it. So I don't think he's got a defence. But yeah, shame on the BBC and Sky not reporting it. Because now the allegations are in the public domain. Social media has gone into full meltdown, and other major media outlets, be it online websites, newspapers, and regional, they picked it up. Surprised also the stuff on Mendy and the Everton and Brighton players regarding their offensive have gone quiet. Yes, well, Benjamin Mendy hasn't gone quiet. He's awaiting his pre-trial hearing. Another charge has been levelled against him. Guildford Sigurdsson, I believe there was no further investigation. I forget who the Brighton player was, but I do know there was a Brighton player as well being investigated for some inappropriate activity off the field. But as I say, there's definitely a culture issue within professional sport. Football, at this point in time, is the sport under the spotlight. We've seen it in cricket as well. Tim Payne, for example, the Australia captain, former Australia captain, um, allegations of misconduct against him. So there's definitely issues, and it's not club specific. It's across the board. I think enough's enough, and if the Premier League and other sports as well, really, I think there needs to be the Premier League needs to come out, the FA needs to come out, the Football League needs to come out. They need to give a joint statement. They need to actually have the balls to say this is not acceptable anymore. Um, we've got the kick it out campaign, the rainbow laces. They're clearly not effective. Because they're meant to be like anti-homophobia, anti-racism, anti-abuse. They're not working. If they were working, we wouldn't need to have them anymore. We wouldn't have the BLM take a knee movement and all these anti-racism gestures and anti-abuse gestures before games. It's just not working. They need to get players from all the clubs, a player representative from every club in the Football League and the Premier League to stand in front of the camera and say enough is enough. They need to get the FA, Premier League, Football League to make a joint statement saying this is wrong. And this has been going on for years. It would, it's no, and at the end of the day, we've seen. Uh, I would like to see the Bengals do it, Super Bowl. But no, at the end of the day, with what we've seen, the fact that this live stream has been dominated by Mason Greenwood and his antics. Now, again, as I say, they're pretty strong allegations, and he's he's had it. He's burned. Um, I can't. I mean, it's like Ryan Giggs though with the allegations against him um, in recent months, and what's come out about Ryan Giggs over the last year or so. It does say, well, Ryan Giggs has got a bit of a checkered relationship history with his ex-wife, his brother's wife, all that, and others. What's come out about Ryan Giggs, for example, is not great. Um, so an individual sport, although I think more sports than just football, definitely have this issue within their culture, and it's not being resolved. I don't think. Let me just turn that light off. It's doing nothing. So yeah, there's definitely a major point of discussion, and I think it's time that enough's enough now. Um, this 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 cannot continue. Um, cannot continue. Too many incidents now. Yeah, we've seen like coaches say, look, we're not happy with an individual player, not taking post match recovery seriously. Um, Obviously, they need some downtime. They're human beings, but if that's what Mason Greenwood's telling his mates, I'm on the PlayStation tonight. That's a code word for I'm beating up my missus tonight. But there was definitely an attitude issue with him. He's young, and other young players. They are the social media generation. If that we're acute now. You see, now you've got to be careful. Now, there were rumours going around that his attitude when it came to staying up late, partying late. We've seen it as well where uh, spending too much time on the games console. But a lot of other lads the same age were doing the same thing. I used to stay up late on the old Xbox until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and then go to work, and it wasn't most professional, but that was my way of relaxing. But I do think Man United were aware of other personality issues and issues with Mason Greenwood off the field. Um, you know, the same thing applies in everyday work. Companies will drink and drug test their employees, for example. We have that policy at my work. Um, People have lost their jobs for being under the influence. People have been sent home for being under the influence. You know, so and there has been a culture within the sport for a very long time, a drink culture, a party culture, and yeah, the lockdown I think has contributed to further issues with Mason Greenwood. And warnings were out there that the lockdown would leave vulnerable people in abusive situations which they can't escape from easily. And those warnings were put out before the lockdown was put in place and while the lockdown was going on. And there was a rise in reports of domestic violence um, uh, in the first 6 months of the lockdown in 2020. And then the Christmas lockdown a year ago, there was again a rise in reports of domestic violence and violence in the home and things like that. So it's not just a football problem, it's a society problem. But in this case, I do think football as a sport needs to make a stand and say enough's enough. Um, yeah, no, I understand. I mean, I've had issues with my sleep patterns and stuff, and I've had some health issues. And yes, I completely agree with not getting enough sleep and the mental side of things. It does affect you. It does. At the same time, um, what we found out about you know Mason Greenwood and what he's been accused of is generally troubling. It is generally troubling. There is no two ways to you know hide that fact. Um, quite frankly, there is no way two ways about it. Um, but there's been rumours about his behaviour, as I say, for some time now. Um, the Benjamin Mendy situation sort of came out of the blue, but again, that highlights a definite culture issue within the sport that has been there for a very, very long time. And then we see what's happened with Yorkshire with the racism scandal, and again how the ECB and the cricket club were aware of what was going on uh, and took inappropriate or lack of action. So there's definitely change that needs to happen within professional sport. Absolutely. Hopefully, this can be a positive catalyst. I think Mason Greenwood is finished. I can't see um, anyone wanting to touch him with a barge pole after this, because players will have friends at other clubs and they will talk saying that this is going on, um, and this is a thing. Talking about the NFL, Tom Brady, I think he does retire. It's pending. We'll wait to see what announcement is made, but I think he knows his race is run now. He's in his early mid 40s. The fact he's gone as long as he has, Tom Brady, is another thing. Yes, domestic violence. It's rugby as well. It's happened a lot in rugby league and especially in the NRL and Super League. There's been a whole spate of, especially over in Australia, there's been a whole spate of players accused of and found guilty of um,
domestic violence, and some of them are very high profile as well. Um, and so that's again something that I've noticed, and it is generally worrying. I was going to mention this to you about cricket and racism. An 18-year-old Barbados born white cricket called Bethel, making the 19 World Cup was called Babylon by West Indies. Yeah, you have to remember culturally in the West Indies there is a minority white population who decided to stay after independence. We've got citizenship in Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Bahamas, and a whole host of the West Indian, Bermuda, and all that. It's a Rastafarian term. Um, it's a Rastafarian term, and and there's a debate whether it's appropriate or not. In that regard, I've got a lot of West Indian friends, and yeah, I'm called a Babylon by them. And another and cracker and other bits and pieces. But over in the West Indies, the culture is completely different, and there are white West Indians who play cricket and are actively involved in society. There's more tension between the Asian and Afro Caribbean communities in the Caribbean than the white community with other groups. I've got friends from the West Indies. It's an interesting part of the world, the history of it. Um, again, it's a culture issue. I wouldn't say it's as prevalent in the West Indies as it is over here. Um, but then you have to ask the question, has has the player, for example, voiced his concerns about that kind of if he finds it abusive or derogatory. Um, it goes both ways. Um, Barbados has anybody that has a sort of opportunity right now, they're looking to take their talent elsewhere because of hard water. Yeah, you have to have a think about it. I mean, the West Indies is a really culturally diverse part of the world. Um, it's what it is. The rugby league culture, there is a binge drinking element. Yes, I've discussed that before in years past, Brandon Smith and their videoed antics. Now, we don't know exactly when that video was obviously filmed, but it's caused controversy right before the Dally M Awards, put a lot of spotlight on the club. And it's not the first incident of Storm players being involved with drugs and alcohol. And of course, with the Dolphins joining in 2023, those two players are off contract, and there's been rumours that they might be leaving the team, and yeah, I completely agree that there is I it's interesting because when you listen to some of the media personalities over in Australia talking about having a drink and talking about some of the antics of years past and the culture shift, there still appears to be like a drink culture. And Australia's apparently got the worst drink culture out there and a higher uptake of drug use than other parts of the Western world. There is an issue in Australia socially. It's not a new thing. Um, the the so, I mean, Paul Kent, for example, he's a divisive journalist. I like Paul Kent personally myself, but he has mentioned that the drink culture in both positive terms and negative terms. So having a beer with your mates after the game, having a little get together, having a barbecue, having a bundles in the bar. Uh, Elliot the former Canterbury, now Canberra prop. So there's definitely issues that the NRL and the AFL to a certain extent need to look at, and there needs to be better discipline. And I think the NRL, much like, and the AFL, much like the Premier League, there is definitely issues there. Derby County, from what we know, there is a takeover bidding process from a North American family called the Binney family, who are involved in the stock market over in the US and property. They're quite wealthy. They put a provisional £28 million bid in for the club. That doesn't include the debts and the 2 legal cases against Wycombe players. Wayne Rooney is committed to the club. He's down Everton. So in that regard, there's been no further developments that I'm aware of, although I think the EFL do not want Derby County to fail. They just need to have proof of transfer, or a day and a half left of the transfer window. More players could be sold to plug the financial holes to get some short-term cash flow. But Wayne Rooney turned down the offer to and was over a potential appointment. So in that regard, in regards to the Derby County, there's been no further news that I'm aware of. In saying that, no news is not necessarily bad news. I don't see the EFL wanting to allow Derby County to fail, basically, because too many games have been played and it would massively and drastically affect the league table. And the promotion and relegation battles would be skewed. And then you would have legal challenges in regards to any potential collapse. Whereas in the Bury situation, they had not played any games up to that point. Therefore, no points were lost by any sides, no points were gained by any sides. So any victories you've had against Derby, for example, draws, those teams would be affected by losing those points, at which point it does affect the final league table. Oh God, my internet's playing up. But there's been no further. I mean, I can Derby, but as far as I'm aware, they're serious. It is serious, but there's a lot of failings of the EFL as well, and the EFL's under a lot of pressure to save face. I don't think the EFL allows Derby to fail, at least this season. But again, Swindon nearly went out of business in the summer. They were saved at the last minute. Obviously, Macclesfield have gone bust since the pandemic started. Bury just before the pandemic started, about 6 months before the pandemic kicked in. So the EFL is under a lot of pressure with the handling of several clubs. I think there needs to be more pressure to regularly audit clubs and their finances. There's been obviously a lot of controversy over the 135% losses over profit rule that's not been properly enforced, because if it was, 60 to 70 clubs would be docked points. The EFL and the Premier League can't have that. Oh yeah, no, it would definitely. If Derby failed, it would actually affect the league positions of clubs, because teams have beaten Derby, teams have drawn against Derby. They would lose those points. Teams have also been beaten by Derby, so those fixtures get annulled as well. So if it was to come down to points difference or goal difference, it completely affects the final table. So we'll see there. What about the 2026 World Cup final? Where do you think the final will be held? I'm going Soldier Field in Chicago, and I think the final's played on grass. I don't think anyone complains about the artificial turf. A lot of injuries because of the artificial turf. I can see it being played on grass. No men's tournament's ever been played on an artificial surface. When it comes to, there's not many grass surfaces in Canada though, so it'll be interesting to see what Canadian stadiums are used. But I think the final is held somewhere like Soldier Field or in LA or in New York, in one of the big stadiums. And I would say it'll be on grass, but that's 4 years away. So we've got a long time to wait before we get to this World Cup. The infrastructure is already in place, so there is that. It would be interesting to see how the tournament plays out in 4 years' time. Who qualifies? Obviously, it's an expanded World Cup. There'll be some new nations there, first-time qualifiers. Oh, no, because the World Cup has already been guaranteed in 2026. If they do go to a 2-year World Cup cycle, that is well down the road. So we will have the 2026 World Cup. That's already been penciled in. There's a lot of money there. Already the contracts have been signed, the infrastructure's in place. If we are going to go into this 2-year World Cup cycle, it's well down the road. Imagine if they do fail and some team do and so yes, it has a massive impact on the league, which is why I don't think we the EFL allow it to happen. I think they accept this bid by the Binney family. It doesn't cover all the debts, but it's an injection of cash. Even FAs have already said that if the plan goes ahead, they're leaving FIFA, and they are very important with UEFA. So in that regard, I think FIFA's proposal is like it gets pushed down the can. They kick the can down the road. And the fact they're in the World Cup as well from 2026, I just don't see it being feasible with the quality 2 years. That would massively impact the. And we're talking about player welfare here. I can't see it going ahead, especially with the two biggest federations threatening to pull out and boycott. Think of the money. Yes, the US and the Asian markets love the World Cup, spend a lot of money. They want to see the best players. And if the best players aren't playing, you risk, especially in this current financial climate with the post-COVID world, as we're going to call it, and correct resistance, in my opinion. In my opinion, there's the player welfare argument is rightly there. The domestic leagues aren't happy because that means more international breaks, which affects the league structures even more. We've already seen restructuring of the FA Cup with no replays after the third round. I don't think we have replays anymore in the FA Cup. I think they're going to get scrapped. We've seen restructuring of Champions League and the Europa League and now the Conference League. There's going to be further restructuring of the Champions League going forward. World Cups. So I can see UEFA saying no, and they have a lot of sway. And it's the Africans and the Asian federations that are in favour. But the best players don't play in Africa and Asia, let's be honest. Mo Salah and Sadio Mane, for example, okay, you could argue they're some of the best players in the world right now, but they play in European leagues. And if the European federations aren't in favour of a 2-year World Cup cycle, then you're not going to have the best tournament, are you? No, I do think the FA Cup replays. There's growing. I fear that the last replay we see was Barrow versus Ipswich. I honestly believe that. I believe that is the last FA Cup replay we see. Plus, this coming season with the World Cup over the Christmas period in the winter. Yeah, no, I can definitely see replays temporarily suspended, but I can see them being the FA not bringing them back. It's very easy to make a policy. It's very hard to undo it. And we'll see what happens. But I think FA Cup replays, as the years have gone by, the final used to have a replay. Should you be drawing at the end, the semi-finals, quarter-finals, they slowly scaled it back over time anyway. And the first and second round doesn't make that much money. Just saying. They do need the money, but we've seen a trend now for the last 15 years of getting the last 15, 20 years of. I think the last final replay was the Palace Man United replay it was Sheffield Wednesday, I think, in 93 was the last FA Cup final replay. So since the Premier League era, they've been slowly eroding the FA Cup replay out. So I think the last semi-final replays was, I think, the last time a semi-final went for a replay was Arsenal Man United in 99. And that famous Ryan Giggs goal. And then they scrapped them, and then they got rid of being, devalued over the last 20 years, and not being, and the TV rights for the League Cup as well. A lot of pressure to put on the EFL to put the League Cup back on free-to-air TV again, alongside the FA Cup, increase the viewership, increase the the fans going to games. The League Cup's been a heavily criticised tournament for a long time, competition for a long time, shall I say. And there is a debate about scrapping the home and away legs and restructuring the League Cup to be similar to the FA Cup, reduce fixture congestion. And that argument's been held for a long time, so that's nothing new. But again, the League Cup is actually sanctioned by the EFL and the FA, so you've got to get the EFL on board to take it off subscription only and put it back on free-to-air TV like they used to. But that's wishful thinking. But we'll see what happens. You know, it is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please, obviously, do leave your comments and things on videos that I posted. I appreciate all the questions. Obviously, the Mason Greenwood situation has dominated this live stream, which is unfortunate. I obviously wasn't aware of the news until I did the live stream, but dominating the news now. I'm surprised BBC and Sky haven't picked it up because other major media outlets, both here and overseas, have gone nuts over it. And yeah, I think he's cooked. I think he's done. I don't think he plays football again. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below it, and obviously when the video is done, and I've got some more videos coming soon. And I'll see you all very, very soon.